Factorization expressions 4. That's algebra 1. Factorizing expressions 4. The expression of for factorization 4 must contain exactly 4 terms. Must, that's a must. They must be exactly 4 and only 4 terms, and must be written in a similar form, something similar to this. X 3x squared plus x 4x 6x plus 4x minus 8. Okay. So most 99.99, not all of the time, must have a square, because it's a special type of quadratic again. And your answer will be in the form mx plus n x plus p. So it's like you factorize in a quadratic, but it has 4, it is split up in 4 terms. Just like when we did factorization, and then when you get 4 terms, it's like it's starting with the 4 terms and you just proceed with the steps. So please read, check out the video that we made and the solution for factorization 3. So if we look at factorization 3, there's going to be a point in time when you have 4 terms. Here it is. If you start with 3, then you break it up to 4, and then you apply factorization 1 for each term. With factorization 4 now, it starts with the 4 terms. So CXC can give you the 4 terms. So what you do, you ensure that the expression has exactly 4 terms, just like this. You apply factorization 1 to the first 2 and the last 2 separately, keeping the sign in the middle, and then you will now have 2 identical brackets with factors outside. Place the factor outside in brackets, then attach the same bracket. So let's apply this now to this example. So here it says, ensure that the expression has exactly 4 terms similar to this one. So 100% of the time you will see a square. So it's like a type of quadratic. 1, 2, 3, 4, exactly 4. Apply factorization 1 to the first 2, and apply factorization 1 again to the second 2, keeping the sign in the middle. The sign in the middle we have is a negative sign. So let's be very careful with this. So we can even put the negative sign right there. So we're on the right side of the negative sign and the left side of the negative sign, because the sign in the middle is a negative sign. Now let's focus on 6 and 4. Between 6 and 4, we all agree that 2 is the highest common factor. P squared and P. P is the letter with the lower power. Q is not common, so we cannot include Q. So we open and close bracket. Now we're going to divide to know what comes inside of the bracket. 6 divided by 2 is 3. P squared divided by P is P plus P. Okay, so 6P squared divided by 2P is 3P. Plus, got plus right there. We've got to divide 4 by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. P divided by P is 1. You don't write the 1. Okay. Q divided by 1 is Q. Okay. So in the end, 6P squared divided by 2P is 3P. 4PQ divided by 2P is 2Q. The P cancelled out. Now we must get 3P plus 2Q on the left side. Right? Remember it says you will now have 2 identical brackets with factors outside. One of the factors outside is 2P. The factors outside can be different, but what is inside of the bracket must be the same. We must get 3P plus 2Q when we are completed, when we are through with 21PQ and negative 14Q squared. So let's look at the 21 and the 14. Obviously, 7 is the highest common factor. And by the way, that's a negative 7. Okay, that's a negative 7. So when you divide in, remember you are dividing now by a negative 7. right? That's very important because we must get plus 2q. Okay. Now let's look at the letters now. P is not common. So we cannot put it outside of the bracket because P is not common, but Q is. You have a Q to the 1 and Q to the squared. Q is the highest common factor. Q can go into Q, Q can go into Q squared. Now we're going to divide by 7Q. Nope, we're going to divide by negative 7Q. Negative 7 into negative 21 is 3. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. Q divided by Q is 1. The Q is cancelled out. But P divided by 1, because there is no P there, so there's an invisible 1. P divided by 1 is P. So we have over 3P. Now, you see the minus there, but the wrong one put a minus. The Russian put a minus. You are dividing by negative 7. Please be very careful with that very tricky little step. When the Russian put negative because you see a negative, you are dividing by negative 7. A negative 7 divided into a negative 14 is equal to a positive 2. Negative divided by a negative is a positive. Q into Q squared is Q. Subtract the exponent. So now we have 3P plus 2Q, 3P plus 2Q. So now we can apply this final step. Place the factors outside the brackets. So we have a 2P can come in a bracket and a negative 7Q. Close bracket. And carry down or attach to it one of the repeating brackets. And this is the final answer. We have factorized this expression. Here's the final answer. So let's try to factorize this expression. So what is the first thing we've got to do? So therefore now, if we have to factorize this, we have to look at the two first terms and the two last terms separately with the negative sign in the middle. So therefore now, between 12 and 18, the highest common factor is 6. Now, following the rule now, we have to look at the letters now, and WM is common to both terms, so WM must come, and then we open close bracket. And now we're going to divide to know what comes in the bracket. 612M divided by 6W. 12WM divided by 6WM is 2. Negative 18WM divided by 6WM is 3. 2 negative 2, 2 minus 3 is negative 1. That defeats the purpose of the exercise, so there must be an error in the working. I think that that's supposed to be N. Okay, so I think this is supposed to be WN, like you have an N there. So I'm going to cross out this M and I'm going to put N. So then here now we will have 2 minus 3 N. Okay, because we must get the same 2 minus 3N when we are going to factorize again. So that must have been a typo. So CXC sometimes have typo, you know. Okay, so if you know what you're doing, you can also detect the typo, but that's a typo on my part. So now we have the negative sign, we've got to keep it in the middle, and let us factor out, or let's factorize those two terms separately. It Zm and 12Zn. Okay. So therefore now, this m is not common now, so it must be attached to the 2. So it's only the W and the highest common factor that's common. That's what comes outside. And M and N will be together 2M minus 3N. So let's proceed. So now we got to find the highest common factor between 8 and 12, which is 4. And by the time we put that 4 there, so now we have to be reminded of the fact that we are going to be dividing by a negative 4. Z is common between the two, so we have to include Z as the factor outside of the bracket. Now, to find what's inside of the bracket, we have to divide by negative 4Z. A negative 4 divided into a negative 8 is a positive 2. The Z's cancel out to give us M. Positive 12 divided by a negative 4. A positive divided by a negative is a negative. That will give us negative 3. The Z cancels out and we are left with N. And we can see that we have identical terms with the first bracket, 2M minus 3N. So obviously we all know what's the final step. What's outside of the bracket, we're going to put them in brackets, bracket them. So that's, and actually it's a continuation. If you really look closely at it, you know it's a continuation of factorization 1. So let's just pause a minute, okay? And that step we have there, you know, it would be wise to, instead of writing, place the factors outside, and you know that term, I can just delete this phrase and just say, continue applying factorization 1. That's what is going on there, you know. The first level factorization, that placing the factor outside in bracket, then attach the same. That's factorization 1, because if you look carefully, you've got two terms. That whole 6W open bracket 2M minus 3N close bracket, that's a term. And then you have another term, 4Z open bracket 2M minus 3N close bracket, that's a term by itself. You've got two terms. Okay, it doesn't look like those simple little terms, but it's a term because they are multiplying, and bracketed is like one term. So that's one term, two terms, separated by a negative sign. So if you look at them carefully, broadly, those two terms, what do they have in common? The highest common factor is 2M minus 3N. Okay, so we're going to factor out that whole coefficient. 3M minus the 2M minus 3N is the highest common factor, because when you put 2M minus 3N in a bracket, that it make it 1. So that's one entity, if you want to put it that way. Coefficient multiplying now. It's common to those two terms. So you factor it out and then you open a bracket. And we're going to divide to know what's coming inside of the bracket. When you divide 6W by 3M minus 2, 3M minus 2M minus 3N, the 2M minus 3N cancels out and you're left with 6W. So basically is factorization 1 you're applying there. Okay. And you're going to divide negative 4Z 2M minus 3N by 2M minus 3N. The 2M minus 3N cancels out and you're left with negative 4Z. And that's it. You're applying factorization 1, okay, when you are actually placing the factor outside brackets and then attach the same brackets. Technically, it's factorization 1 you are continuing with, and that's the final answer.